Hello, and welcome to the Argyle CFO Leadership Forum, FP&A Frameworks for Success. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have some important information to share with you, and then we will turn the floor over to our esteemed opening keynote speaker. First, we would like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, SAP. Our sponsor is committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. We also welcome you to stay socially connected during today's event. So for those of you who are active on social media, please use the hashtag #ArgyleDigital and be sure to follow us at Argyle Exec Forum. Finally, and most importantly, we would love to hear from you. So during each session, we encourage you to submit your questions and comments in the Q&A box on your screen. Following each presentation, we have set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on your questions. Thank you again for joining us. Now let's get started. Without further delay, I would love to introduce Matt Pileski, Regional Chief Financial Officer at Arthur J. Gallagher. We're excited to have Matt with us for his opening keynote titled The FP&A Negotiator, How to Navigate Conflict, Build Alignment, and Drive Operational Change. Welcome, Matt, and over to you.
Okay, well, as always, I'm honored to be here today, and I'm going to talk about some things that I've been learning and applying, which is basically how do we navigate conflict? And if you think of us as a strategic partner, how do we get people where they're going? Like where are they going? How do they get there? What mindset and tools do we have to get there? And then we'll cover some frameworks, some concepts to apply this. I always like my growth and profitability matrix. That's an FP&A tool. I prefer rolling 12-month numbers to identify trends as opposed to monthly. And then segmenting is really important. And these all kind of play into, well, how we help the business negotiate better decisions. So this I got from FP&A Trends. There's a newsletter that comes out I think it's every 2 weeks by Larissa. If anybody wants to join hers, she's got a newsletter. But she's posted top 5 lessons that she's learned in the last 10 years in FP&A. And one, this really resonated with me because our job is not necessarily do analysis, which is in our title. It's to drive decisions with numbers, and you get, data supported decisions, right? Let's help influence people. The hardest transformation for us is really our identity is changing. It's not the skill upgrade. The skills we can all learn. We can learn how to use AI. We can do whatever. But when you get that identity transformation, that my job is really to help people make better decisions with data. That's a huge shift. Technology, and we all are seeing AI. It's just going to make things move faster. So if we have good processes, it's going to get us to better decisions. But if we have bad processes, it's going to make it fail faster. So we got to be aware of the pros and cons of technology and really how we use it to drive better decisions. Maturity actually means doing less, not more. When you think about, we have like this model we've been using and we keep tweaking it, and no matter how much we tweak it, it never gets better. And those who work with me know exactly what I'm talking about. The right answer might be to scrap it and start over. Now, that's not always a popular decision, but it's a lot of times the right one. And the biggest breakthroughs happen at 0, not the next iteration. And again, this is the whole, we're going to do less with more. So then she had a quote here that I want to go through. When you ask a financial controller to become a business partner, you're not asking them to learn new skills. You're asking them to become a different person professionally. So you're changing their identity. And we need to be aware of that identity shift because it's not easy to change your identity. So where are we going? Like, this is where I always think of myself as a co-pilot to my business leaders, and they want to go from Boston to Chicago. Well, you can take a train, you can take a plane, you can take a bus, you can take a car. You can get there any ways. They're all going to get you there faster. So we're sitting here managing the dashboard, telling you which direction you're going, how fast you're going. But the tools that I've been adding is really these how questions. Always kind of come back to, how do we sell more? How do we structure and incentivize our T's to achieve more? So if you think we're giving this data, it's really to support these questions. How do we influence better results with better capital allocation? So make our leaders think, because we have to support their ideas. I know a lot of times we love to tell people what to do. but then they resent us. So getting alignment is key, and that's one of the themes of this presentation. Okay, so my where are we going framework that I use, and this is basic economics. I don't know if you remember from Economics 101, where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. That's the sweet spot. Well, where we like to be is where we want either high revenue growth or low revenue growth. We really don't want negative revenue growth, but it's possible. And you got high or low revenue growth, and then are your marginal costs going faster or slower than your revenue growth? And if you got high revenue growth and it's going faster than your cost, you're in a sweet spot. You got plenty of reinvestment dollars. If you're in low, you're kind of stable. And if you got high revenue growth, but you're spending a lot of money to get there, you're in a fun spot, but it's not sustainable. So we're going to have to change over time. And if we're in low, now we're in a trouble spot. If our costs are growing faster than our expenses and we're not growing revenues, well, now we're going to have to cut harder. So, it's a simple framework, and just know your constraints, know your drivers, and this works. What I always like to do is encourage thinking in economic terms. We're the finance team. They tend to listen to us when we present numbers and we talk in economic terms. That's what they expect from us. So that's what I'm going to give them. Okay. And typically go back to, we don't have a cost problem. I can get them anything they approve, they want to get approved. We're fortunate, we're a big company. But if we make the bet, we got to get the growth to come with it. So just be aware, you are signing up to take dollars that I'm going to give you. You have that responsibility for growth. Okay, tools, mindset to get there. So this is something, this book came out in like 2010, and I've been using it, but we're all in sales. Even though we're in finance, we need to convince people how to interpret our data. And Dan Pink's got a little simple thing. It's attunement, buoyancy, clarity. This is great in win-win situations. This is how I've gotten to where I am in my career. I found people that I believe in where they're going, and I align myself with them and I support them. But then recently, I've been introduced to a new book because I've been encountering some difficulties, because you don't always find yourself in a win-win situation. Sometimes you're in a win-lose situation. So this book was written by an FBI hostage negotiator, and his whole premise is there's no split the difference. There's no middle. If I have hostages, you can't cut them in half. He's like, I want to recover all the hostages, and I'm working with bad people, because they stole them. So how do I get there? So this is basically some of his premises that are very similar to Pink's, but it's a little bit different application, because now we're actually operating and there is no win-win. Negotiation is emotional, not rational. He calls what tactical empathy, and we'll go into that. Know is your friend. This was kind of one of the hardest things for me to digest. Ask how and what questions. I find this to be brilliant. And then anchor and shake perception. I've always been good with this. That's consistent with Pink. So let's go through what I've learned and how I'm using it, because I think it's really great info. So he's got this summary of profiles. And this is similar to a DISC profile for those who've seen it, but the negotiation. So when I think of it, and I think of somebody who works with me is Patrick. He's a great analyst. He gets it right. He gets the data-driven, methodical, hates surprises, silence and thinking. But his worst match isn't assertive. Assertive is those producers, those business partners who just want things quick. They don't necessarily care about being accurate. They want it fast. And so they don't match really well with the analyst. Then you have the accommodator that's in the middle, and they're trying to preserve the relationship, but they're just they don't want to overcommit. They're quick to agree, but it's kind of hard. You have a risk of accommodator, you have a risk of nothing getting done. So knowing which profile you are and who you're working with, this is kind of going to help you in how you actually give them what they need, not what they want. Give them what they need. So tactical empathy, Aaron. This one I think of my coworker, Bonnie, because Bonnie's always telling people, shut up and listen. It's don't keep talking, because negotiation, it's not a battle. It's a discovery process. So think about it. If you want to get something from somebody, your first thing is to figure out what they want and why they want it. And you do that by actually talking to them. And you got to quiet the voices in your own head. Very frequently, we're thinking about what we want to say as opposed to actually listening. And he used this example of, you don't think this is hard? The FBI, when they're going through this, they'll have 4 people recording conversations, analyzing every single word, because it is hard. If it was easy, they wouldn't do that. So if you think active listening is easy, it is anything but easy. Then I love his voices, and I've used this with my kids. Like when my kids are arguing, I'll ask them to use their FM radio voice. Like slow down. And it's amazing how it works. Because if I tell them to stop fighting and I use it in a direct assertive voice, well, they just keep going. But the minute I introduce my own FM radio voice and remind them, it flips them into a different mode, and it actually works. So know your voices, and then mirrors work like magic. He has this thing, it's like repeat the last 3 words somebody's saying, because this shows them you're engaged if you're repeating the words they're saying, and encourages them to keep speaking. And you can do this without actually having to agree, without having to concede to anything. This builds rapport, which helps us get to where we need to do to actually start to, get concessions. Okay, so don't be thinking about your argument when the other person's talking. Listen to theirs first. And don't agree when stuff you don't agree with. Just listen and acknowledge. That's very important. Okay, and this is another one that's great. The communication is 7% verbal, 38% nonverbal, and 55% body language. And we do this as we're on screens. I look at people and they're like grabbing their neck like this. That always tells me they're in this pain of the neck situation. You can tell a lot by body language. I've also been on ones where it's like, I wasn't paying attention to the screen. They're like, did you see that person roll their eyes? So be very aware of your body language, not just your words. Okay. Labeling pains with the accusation audit. So, and this is the counterintuitive one here where we go to the benefits to disagree are often greater than the benefits to agree. So a lot of times you're presenting information, think about it, somebody has bad results. When you have good results, nobody cares. They're all like, okay, great, make a good result. When you have bad results, well, the business doesn't want to accept it. It's easier for them to say the numbers are wrong than it is to agree with you. So you kind of got to level the playing field and be like, okay, we're looking at this and say, here's why we see these numbers. And use terms like it seems like, it sounds like, it looks like. Use your pauses to encourage them to keep talking as opposed to us doing all the talking. And then when you're done, be like, okay, what's the worst that's going to happen? If we have bad results, what's the worst that happens? And then we can start thinking about, well, what are we doing to change it, right? But this is where you kind of got to let them say why it's not fair. These results aren't mine. This was like, let them go through that whole process. And then after they've gotten that out, now you can talk to them about what they do with them, as opposed to them telling you, just keep running the numbers until they turn out different. And what do you know? Bad numbers are bad numbers, no matter how many times we calculate them. And I know we've all been there. Okay. The other thing is, from the business's point of view, the easiest thing to do is to write a check to solve a problem. But that's the whole thing. If you go back to the framework, well, if we're writing checks to solve every problem, well, then costs are definitely going to grow faster than revenues. So when we get cost requests, it's like we got to reframe it. Well, how do we sell more? How do we sell more while controlling cost? Go back to these calibrating questions, because this creates alignment, because we do want to sell more. We do, like, and you got to do it with your FM radio voice. You can't do it in an accusatory way. We got to anchor on what we're trying to achieve. The problem with yes and why we should learn to love no. And this was very eye-opening for me, because a lot of times when I get a yes, I'm happy I got a yes. And then the point of the book was, usually yeses are either counterfeit yeses. This is when you're saying yes to somebody just to get them off the phone when you really disagree with them, or you're saying yes because you're kind of checked out and you kind of agree, but you're not really going to do anything. So you want to get to the commitment yes. And those are rare and hard to get to, and you have to get deep into conversation. So what often comes first is a no, and no's are a gift, because no, and I think about this with my wife, no, and I don't know how many of you are married, but my wife tends to disagree with everything I say. So what this says is that's psychologically normal, because there's only, when you're in a marriage, there's only commitment yeses. There's no counterfeit or confirmation. If I get her to yes, I'm holding her accountable. So her response is, well, I'll go with no. That makes me feel safe. It protects inefficient decisions. It slows things down. And then if I really want to get a yes, we can press forward. We can figure out it's really probably not a not now. Like we can have the deeper conversation, but you got to get to the deeper conversation. So no's actually make the other person more ready. If you can get past no, that's when you can get to a commitment yes. So don't get upset when you get a no. Don't be cockling and avoidant. Address it with the best you can. So only commitment yeses really matter, and you can't change anyone's mind until you understand why they're giving you a no. Remember those two things. Okay. The breakthrough moment, that's right versus you're right. And I found myself doing this too, because I was asking a friend, well, why can't I get through? And she starts giving me advice and says, here's what you need to do. And I kind of thought she was right, but I wasn't really ready, sure. I wasn't ready to commit. So I go, you're right. And I didn't say that's right. So that's right means you understand me. You're right is kind of a counterfeit yes or a confirmation yes. It's like, I'm not ready to commit yet. So you can get to a yet right by summarizing, okay, like, I think you said this. Let me summarize what you're saying. Let's go through. And you're trying to create unconditional positive regard. It opens the door for this is where we can have these discussions where we actually change behaviors. Okay. The key here again is empathy is not the same thing as agreeing. It's I understand where you're coming from. You don't have to agree with everything. You just have to get them to feel understood. Okay. So psychology, how to simplify, and this is my system 1 versus system 2 and when to know. So 95% of decisions are made real quick. They're not really paying attention. These are the confirmation yeses. 2% are made in rational thinking. This is slow and logical, really thought through. We know we got to spend 95% of the time in system 1 or nothing will get done. So the best way to do this is like kind of taking those numbers and supporting them with a story. I mean, this gets into Bayes' theorem. I don't have this in this presentation, but it's really like we kind of know where we want to get to. Do the numbers support what we're doing, or do they refute them? Because if we know our stuff, we're going to get there. And then when you get into system 2, sometimes you want them in system 2 to slow things down. This is when you can't dazzle them, baffle them. If you give them really complex things, it's like, okay, you're smart, I'll accept it. But that's maybe not a way, that's a way to buy time. It's not a way to get to commitment yeses. Okay, so structuring the debate. Ask curious questions that start with how or what. And what you shouldn't do is start with questions that start with why. Because why is always an accusation. When you say, why did this happen? It's like, who are we blaming? It actually is counter to getting alignment. When we say, how do we do better? How do we sell more? How do we structure this differently? We're getting them in the right mindset. So after we've kind of asked these questions, let the other guy go first. Then you got to kind of use loss aversion. This is more of the Kahneman stuff, where it's like, well, what could go wrong? What do we have to lose? People take risks to avoid losses. They don't really like to take risks to get gains. Emotionally, like, what's the worst that'll happen? Get them thinking. But fear is going to drive more actions than gains. So, like, be like, look, if we don't do this, here's what's going to go wrong. Establish some ranges. Pivot to non-monetary tools. Sometimes, like, just making people feel like part of a team, giving them praise. That's sometimes can help frame the debate as much as money sometimes. And sometimes we got to use odd numbers versus precise numbers. I'll get to this on the next slide here. Okay, so I'm a terrible bargainer. I hate bargaining. I like to get in and anchor things first. That's my style. I like to anchor first, because if I anchor it, then we end up kind of in the right spot. So this was fascinating to me, and I haven't really tried it yet, but I think it's worth sharing. So set your target price. Let's say your target price is 100. When you go in, know that whatever you go in as a first offer, especially in combative situations, whatever it's going to be higher than whatever your first offer is. So set your first offer at 65% of your price. calculate 3 raises of decreasing increments to 85, 95%, 100%. So like you're going to go in 65. They're going to tell you you're crazy. You're going to be like, well, why am I crazy? You're going to ask your calibrating questions. You're going to say why. Then you're going to come back a second time. And you're going to get to a little bit higher than 65. Maybe it's 85. You're going to keep coming up a little bit. And you're going to use round numbers. It's 65 and 85. And then when you go to close them, you're going to use a really precise number, because they're going to say, oh, you must have put a lot of thought into that if it's 37,893 as opposed to 38,000. It's just kind of how it also changes them and anchors it differently. $38,000 is like, well, why isn't it 40? Why isn't it 42? If it says 37,893, now it's like, well, why isn't it 38? And then the other person realizes it's so little money to worry about. And then even to show them that your limit, then you throw in non-monetary items. This happened last time we bought a car. And I was still shaking my head at this. They threw in, my son made fun of it. They threw in a cooler at the end. It was a really nice $500 cooler. It was one of those, fancy Yetis. And it's like, okay, we spent $40,000 for a car. Who cares if we got a $500 cooler, right? But you think from an FP&A standpoint, you can throw in some type of future favor. Hey, I know you want this, but this is signaling you're at your limit. Okay. Financial data, and this goes back to, we used to just present numbers. They'd be like, okay, we want to get your monthly P&L. We present the P&L. And then they go through and they nitpick and they say, oh, well, here's all the things that are wrong with the P&L. And we're on the defensive. And I hate being on the defensive. So what we've started doing is when we present the P&L, we now will present it with a narrative. And the narrative is focusing on 12-month averages, segmenting, giving real insight that's supported by the numbers. And when you use 12-month rolling numbers, they stay consistent from month to month. We can understand the trends better. They don't yo-yo up and down because, well, we borrowed from June, it came into May, then June's up, May's back. Didn't affect the whole year. It lets us focus on the drivers and the trends and like, well, are we trending up? Are we trending down? Because as you know, my framework is marginal revenue, marginal cost. So when you confuse, you lose, get the noise out, get clear stories. Rolling 12-month numbers help you do that. Okay. So finally, we'll get to kind of my takeaways here, which is FP&A is evolving. Our identity is changing. We're going to drive decisions, not just provide analysis. We're all going to embrace AI. We're going to go faster. But realize when we go faster, if we have bad underlying processes, it's going to get us to a bad spot faster. If we have good underlying processes, we're going to get to a good spot faster. So it's not just about using technology. It's about using technology wisely. Negotiating tools that can help us perform better. Alignment beats accuracy. When we have bad results, the business asks us to recalculate it over and over again. It doesn't matter how accurate it is or isn't accurate it is. They're just trying to beat us down. What we need to do is get alignment. Tactical empathy helps us get aligned. Use the how and what questions, avoid the why questions. And then always go back to your drivers. What's my new business? What's my retention? What's my comp or R's? You'll have different drivers, but know your drivers. Now you've got them focused on the things that matter. You got your story, and you're in a good place to negotiate because you have established a relationship with them where they will actually listen to you. Okay. And then finally, all this stuff is good. Underlying economics must anchor decisions. So marginal revenue versus marginal cost, that's one of my favorite equations. It's economics 101. Remember your incentives and know them. Your people are going to respond to incentives. So if you want to change behavior, you got to change incentives. So be aware of all the incentives. And marginal decisions matter more than averages. We look at averages, you kind of got to segment it and look it down and break down what really drives the numbers. So, normally we would have questions, but I think I'm on a recording. So, Britt, where should we go from here?
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for such an insightful presentation. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be made available on demand following the event. Our next session will begin at 11:35 Eastern, which will be a panel titled "The Future of FP&A: Building Agile, Insight-Driven Finance Organizations." Please remain on the stage, and the next session will begin automatically. We look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.